So I'm going to explain one of the biggest challenges that people have with motivation, and I've got my whiteboard on here, so I'm going to try something new. So we're going to start off with the gap analysis. So this is the starting point. This is here. This is where any person starts, and that's why we usually start with the balance wheel. We get an assessment of where a person is starting, how they're assessing their life in different categories. So the next thing we're going to do is create another point, which is called there, the place that someone wants to get to. Yeah, and the gap analysis is how to get from here to there. That's the gap. And what happens is, let's call this one motivation, and this is time. This is very common. I've seen this so many times. When a person is at the start, at the beginning, the first thing they generally tend to do is think about the result that they want to achieve and obtain. The final result, whether it's a health goal, whether it's a relationship, money goals, whatever. They visualize on some level the result that they want to achieve and the goal that they want to get. And what happens is, in that moment, right at the beginning, motivation goes up high. The brain releases chemicals. It releases endorphins. A person gets into a very motivated state while they think about the result that they want to achieve. And the brain can't tell the difference between something that's imagined and something that's real. So when someone connects with their goal, the brain releases a rush of endorphins as if that goal or result has already materialized, and that feeling of motivation comes on. Now, what happens is, the next step after that is that you have to start taking action. Now, when you start taking action, the brain goes into a different thing. It goes away from the result that you want to achieve and it goes into task mode. It starts thinking about the thing that you have to do to get the result. And what happens is, all that motivation drops off and it comes all the way back down, because you're now going into cortisol. Generally, when you start thinking about doing something, the brain releases a different set of chemicals, cortisol, stress chemicals, because you're now in the doing. And what happens is that unless you learn how to deal with cortisol and how you learn to deal with problem solving and how to deal with tasks, you'll lose motivation. Now, within a few days, what tends to happen, I'll do a different color here, you'll repeat the same cycle again. You'll think about a new goal, yeah, and motivation will go up, and then you'll go into task and it'll go down. And then you'll repeat it again. You'll think about a new goal and motivation will go up and it goes down. And you'll jump from one goal to the next, never sticking with one goal long enough to get you from here to there. So here's one of the ways we're dealing with that. Let me add another page on here if I can. So here's one of the ways of dealing with that, and we'll do the same thing again. So you got here, you've got there, this is where you want to get to, this is your time. Motivation goes up as you think about where you want to get to, and then it drops down on the task. So the way to deal with that is, rather than thinking of the end result, what you do is you break this down into milestones, small checkpoints along the way. So the motivation, instead of going for the full length where you want to get to at the end, what you do is you're focusing on the next step. And the motivation required to get to the next step is a lot less. and what you do is you focus on just a small task. So instead of going for big motivation, what you're doing is you're getting motivation here, but because where you want to get to is a smaller area, you can deal with just this step here. Here. So you set a smaller milestone. In Eat That Frog, let me switch screen again. So in Eat That Frog here, let me find out if the chapter, I'll see if I can find out which chapter it is. Chapter 10, take it one oil barrel at a time, page 60. So what this in this book here, he was telling the story about a person many years ago driving an old Land Rover across the heart of the Sahara Desert, deep in modern Algeria. By the time the desert had been abandoned by the French for years and the original refueling stations were empty and shuttered, the desert was 500 miles across in a single stretch, without water, food, a blade of grass, or even a fly. It was totally flat, like a broad yellow sand parking lot that stretched to the horizon in all directions. More than 1,300 people had perished in the crossing. Often drifting sands had obliterated the track across the desert, and travellers had gotten lost in the night, never to be found again alive. To counter this lack of features in the terrain, the French had marked the track with black 55-gallon oil drums every 5 kilometers, which was exactly the distance to the horizon formed by the curvature of the earth. Because of this, in the daytime we could see 2 oil barrels, the one we had just passed and the one 5 kilometers ahead of it, and that was all we needed to stay on course. All we had to do was to steer for the next oil barrel. As a result, we were able to cross the biggest desert in the world by simply taking it one oil barrel at a time. Very good chapter, very good analogy about breaking big goals down into small measurable milestones, one oil barrel at a time. And that's how I'm working on my goal. I was 101 kilograms in July. I'm 77 kilograms now, so I'm 50 pounds down. But I didn't get down 50 pounds in just a single step. It was, and I break it down, 4 ounces at a time. I knew that every day I went to the gym, the likelihood I was going to lose 4 ounces. And then another day I'd go on 4 ounces, and within 3 days I'd lose a pound, and within a week I'd lose 2 pounds, and I've just stuck with it over 6-7 months, and that's why I've managed to get it down. So all I wanted to share with you today is, if you're working on a goal and you're losing motivation, rather than thinking about how big the mountain it is that you've got to climb, just think about the step that you can take today. And then eventually what will happen is you will get to the end, you'll get to your goal.